Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. It is Thunderbolts week. I am very, very excited to talk about this newest MCU film. Actually, probably the most excited I've been to talk about an MCU film in a long, long time, dating back to, Spider-Man No Way Home. That's a little bit of a preview for this upcoming episode. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us on episode 76 of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Thank you again for joining us. If you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. We are trying to get to 2,000 subscribers by the end of the year. That would be incredible. So we are getting there. Make sure to subscribe to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. If you are watching this on YouTube, make sure to give the video a like and let me know in the comments down below what you think about any of the topics as well. A lot of Thunderbolt stuff, as I mentioned before. And then also, if you're interested in the audio-only platform, we have Spotify, Anchor, and Apple Podcasts. We are available there, so make sure to go check it out. Leave a rating if you're interested in just listening on a run or hanging out in the car, anything like that. Make sure to check out the podcast there as well. Guys, let's dive in. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the topics for this week. Alrighty, guys, I just saw the Minecraft movie, or a Minecraft movie, as it is officially titled. And I know it's a bit late to be doing a review, so we're not going to call this a review. I've decided to title this segment, I've finally watched the Minecraft movie. Because, to be honest with you, well, first of all, this is the Access Blockbusters Pod, and sometimes we just want to talk about the Minecraft movie. We've been talking about it actually a fair amount over the past couple months, because the trailers to me, and this is really why I'm making this segment, because the trailers to me have just been awful. I think those Minecraft movie trailers have been some of the worst trailers I have ever seen. And so, to me, when the movie came out in early April, it's about a month ago, the only way I was going to see this movie on opening weekend was if the movie somehow got hailed as the best single movie of all time, and it blows away expectations, and it's such a big surprise, and don't believe what you see in the trailers, just go in and watch the movie and be surprised. Like Lego Movie kind of, right? And if that were the case, okay, I'm going. On the flip side, there was a specific scenario in which people said, this is the worst movie ever made. You have to see it to believe it. In which case I would have gone, okay, let me see. As it turns out, a Minecraft movie came out of the gates with literally the exact opposite of both of those at a 50-something percent, 53% last time I checked on Rotten Tomatoes. Exactly down the middle. I don't know if that number has changed. Honestly, I haven't checked in a while, but when I checked, I think around the time it was opening, 50-something percent on Rotten Tomatoes. And as that were the case, I said, yeah, okay, so that was probably the scenario in which, that's the middle area of which I'm saying, no, I'm not going to watch it. But then something interesting happened. And we're going to talk about this more probably next week on the Access Blockbusters Pod when a Minecraft movie is nearing the quote-unquote end of its theatrical run. The movie started to do really well in terms of box office. And we'll see where it eventually lands. I think probably, like I said, towards the middle or end of May, we'll do another segment about the box office of a Minecraft movie and talk about why the movie did so well. Last I checked, it was around 600 million, or at least above 500 million for sure. Crazy numbers, crazy big numbers. And so, I have some theories as to why I think the movie did so well. And at a certain point, it's April, I'm paying for, the AMC A-List subscription. I hadn't seen any movies in theaters, just got very busy in April. And I thought, let's see what this is all about. So, I finally watched a Minecraft movie. These are just my personal thoughts. It is the quintessential, and I say this not negatively, I just say this to make the point, it is a quintessential children's movie. No derogatory meaning behind that. Just from my perspective, as I was watching a Minecraft movie, I went, oh, this is a movie designed specifically for 5 to 10-year-olds. And again, look, in my theater, it's about a month later, or maybe 3 or 4 weeks later when I saw the movie, there were a lot of kids. And, well, actually, they weren't enjoying it as much as I thought they were, which was interesting. Like, they weren't screaming and yelling. I've seen those videos online, obviously, of people, children throwing things and kids throwing things. That's crazy. But on the flip side, the kids in my theater didn't even seem to be enjoying it all that much, but whatever. As I was watching the movie, I sat there and I went, oh, okay, so what went on in the minds of the creators was, let's make the most appealing movie we can to kids who know the game, who have played the game, in the age range of maybe 5 to 12. Again, I don't mean that in a negative way. That's totally fine. It just got me thinking, right? Because the movie itself, this segment's not going to contain many spoilers. Not that there's a whole lot to spoil. But, I think what I was thinking about, actually, for the most part, was the idea of, wow, it's kind of amazing, actually, then when studios do make movies that are, generally marketed towards children. And by that, you just mean, animated or quote unquote cartoony or whatever that means. And yet they appeal to adults as well. In fact, there are films like Inside Out 1 and Inside Out 2 that I would argue are more geared towards adults, which is kind of amazing to me. But I think kids of that age range would love those films as well. So to me, it's, that's why I'm so amazed by Pixar films, or even How to Train Your Dragon, for example. Even the Kung Fu Panda films, for example, speaking of Jack Black, I think adults can mildly enjoy, right? So as I was watching this movie, I went, oh, interesting. Because it's not often that I go out and watch movies that are just directly geared towards kids. I don't consider Pixar to be in that realm. But I think that it's, for the first time in a while, I saw a movie like that and I went, oh, okay, so that's what this is. And that's what it was. It definitely wasn't for me. Probably my least favorite movie of the year so far. Nothing to do with the fact that it is not the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not, it's not a movie where I sat there and I went, oh, please, just this is a crime against cinema. No, nothing like that. Jack Black these days seems to only have one mode when he comes to acting. It is just this over the top. He screamed the entire movie, and of course he sang a couple times, but it was interesting. I mean, I don't think I've seen Jack Black do anything different than that for quite some time. But anyways, I watched the Minecraft movie. It has some strange things in there, like Jennifer Coolidge. Everything that Jennifer Coolidge does in this movie, I was baffled by. Again, though, at the end of the day, I mean, even I could have done a review of this, I suppose, if I watched it when it came out on opening weekend. But as I sit back now, I'm almost glad I didn't, because what was I going to say? I hated this, I didn't love this bothered me, this bored me. It's a movie made for kids, and I hope kids love the movie, and they clearly seem to, because, again, the movie is making a massive amount of money. And so, again, I mean, I take that for what you will. Maybe we should be striving and pushing for movie studios to be making more Pixar-like films. And I think we should. Does that mean there's anything wrong with a movie directly aimed for children? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe that's a discussion we can have in the comments down below. We will, like I said, once the movie is starting to wrap up its worldwide box office gross, and I want to see where it lands. I don't think it's going to hit $1 billion, but it's going to make a lot of money. We'll talk about definitely the ramifications of that and how Minecraft movie got there. But in the meantime, guys, have you seen a Minecraft movie, and what did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, this might be it. This might be the final time. Probably not the final time, but one of the last times on the YouTube channel we're going to be talking about the DCU's Sergeant Rock. And I'm not saying that is a bad thing. I'm not saying, oh, I'm sick and tired of Sergeant Rock. Nothing like that. It's just been interesting to me because I feel like of all the projects from Marvel, from DC, that are in development, that have been in development, that were in some kind of pre-production, we've talked about Sergeant Rock, it seems like a lot, disproportionately compared to other films. Clayface as well, we've kind of talked about that pre-production and the casting and directors and whatnot. But Sergeant Rock, I mean, Daniel Craig, Colin Farrell, directors, writers, we've been talking about this film. It's such an interesting film in the DCU because it's not one of those, the big characters like Flash or Green Lantern or Batman or whatever. He's a more obscure character in the DC canon, but James Gunn seemed pretty intent on the fact that they had a script and they were going to go ahead with the writers and directors of Challengers, I believe, Luca Guadagnino, and I forget the writer's name, but that duo. And then all of a sudden, James Gunn, who seemed like he had it, he was ready to make it. He was like, hey, we have the script, it's ready to go and all that kind of stuff, and we're good. It's gone because Sergeant Rock has apparently been canceled from DC. So a lot of articles, a lot of, the major outlets reporting it. I'm reading this from the Hollywood Reporter, and, I think it's always funny because they like their puns. All these outlets and articles love their puns. But I'm just going to read a little bit from here, and we'll talk about it on the other side. So, quote, "The battle is over even before it, that's a redundancy. The battle is over even before it even began for World War II soldier Sergeant Rock," who, by the way, has already been in the DCU. He's been in Creature Commandos, if you guys remember, in that little flashback for GI Robot. So he's already been in there. And that's why it kind of felt like, it maybe would have been a natural transition, I suppose, into a film, even though that film takes place during World War II, which again, I mean, MCU has done it, right? Captain Marvel, Captain America, the First Avenger, they've gone back in time. Not like the DCU couldn't do it, but I just wonder about that because it doesn't seem like there was an interesting, or not interesting, but a natural, rather, transition into the present day timeline of the DCU, but, it's fine. Like, they didn't need it. It was always a curious thing for me. But anyways, let's continue on with this article. Quote, Sergeant Rock, DC Studios action war movie based. No, I shouldn't say based. I'm reading this for the first time and maybe they were in a rush to get this out. But anyway, Sergeant Rock DCU's action war movie that was about to shoot this summer will no longer move forward, sources tell The Hollywood Reporter. The scrolling. The feature project with Luca Guadagnino in the director's chair and Colin Farrell as the titular DC Comics hero was in preparation. There are so many typos in this article. My goodness. No offense to The Hollywood Reporter because they're usually very reputable in terms of this kind of stuff, but lots of typos all over the place. Based on the titular DC Comics hero and was in preparation, pre-production as it planned to shoot in England. It was also in the throes of casting, trying to line up actors who would play the Men of Easy Company, the combat unit fighting Nazi forces in Europe. Sources say Mike Feist, who was, he was in Challengers, but also, I'm saying this now, he was in Challengers, but also in West Side Story as well, was lined up for a role. The role of a female French Renaissance fighter had also been set per sources. So this film was pretty far into production. This is me talking. This film was very far into production. And it's kind of unclear. The next article, the next paragraph in this article says, quote, it is unclear why the project has been shut down, although an insider said it came down to the project's scheduling needs of shooting outdoors, which is so interesting and so, I don't know, unexpected. I would never have guessed something like that. I mean, of all the reasons, the need to schedule out to shoot outdoors was really interesting. Quote, the insider said that the project was not going away and would be reassessed at the end of the year for a possible summer shoot in 2026. So it's not, let's be clear, because these articles are saying not moving forward, canceled. And I said that at the beginning, and I should rephrase that now. It's, I guess, according to this, the film has not been canceled, but it's indefinitely being pushed back and reassessed. So they're going to reassess the film, and it's going to be, they're going to see if they can do it next year. So it's not like they don't want to make the movie, I guess. It's just that, I don't know, there's some weird scheduling things going on here that I didn't foresee. So we may very well be talking about Sergeant Rock in 6 months as they prepare to shoot, and they have, Mike Feist is announced as a cast member, and that female French Renaissance fighter is also, cast. So we might be talking about it again, but for the time being, Sergeant Rock, which looked like it was on the fast track for the DCU, is no longer being fast tracked and being greenlit as of the time of this recording. So that's something interesting, and we'll keep monitoring this as we go along. So what do you guys think about this? Sergeant Rock, was that a film in the DCU you were particularly looking forward to, or was it one of those films where you were like, yeah, we'll see when it comes out? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, what we're about to talk about is so strange to me. It's endlessly fascinating. I'm actually quite excited to talk about this because it's so weird, and I think, I don't know, is it possible that a Marvel Comics writer has just spoiled a lot of surprises for Avengers Doomsday? It's possible. Is it probable? Is it likely? I don't know. To be honest, I'm of a couple minds of this because it's coming from a very strange source, but we're here to talk about it. So you heard that right. A Marvel Comics writer, Chris Claremont, was speaking at a panel somewhere and might have just spoiled a lot of random things about Avengers Doomsday. It is so weird, and we're going to talk about it all here. He was at the Huntsville Pop Culture Expo 2025, which is, again, I mean, all respect to the Pop Culture Expo in Huntsville. It's not, San Diego Comic-Con. And he just got on a panel and just started talking. And look, to preface all of this, before we dive into the quotes here, I'm looking at an article from The Direct. Sometimes these writers have actual information, right? It's like sometimes, for example, Jim Starlin, who I believe created Thanos as a character, was consulted for Avengers Infinity War, I believe. Rob Liefeld, who has a lot of problems these days with Kevin Feige, was the creator of Deadpool. And for a certain amount of time, at least he knew some things about Deadpool and Wolverine, and he knew things about the Deadpool films. So sometimes these comic book writers and creators are definitely consulted. And there have been actually a lot of controversies around that of actually comic book writers who have not been consulted for certain characters. I have to point out, and because again, there are comic book runs called Doomsday in the Marvel lore. I don't think that Doomsday is necessarily pulling from anyone in particular. And then specifically for Secret Wars, we have to point out that Chris Claremont did not write any of the Secret Wars runs, I don't believe. I think that the original run was written by Jonathan Hickman, and the newer one was Brian Michael Bendis. So just pointing that out, that when we talk about a Marvel or a comics writer who has all of this alleged information, one has to wonder where this information came from. It's not like Kevin Feige just sits down with Chris Claremont every other day and he's like, oh, let me give you some updates on Avengers Doomsday. I don't know. It's possible. We'll talk about at the end how likely I think this is. It is certainly possible that this is real information that he has, or it could just be speculation and just things that he's saying out loud. So I'm reading from the direct, and there are a bunch of quotes here. We're just going to read through some of them because it's endlessly fascinating, the kind of stuff that he says. Honestly, not a lot of it is super surprising, but just the fact that he might know some of this information, I think is so strange to me. So let's look at this first quote here. This first quote, has anyone seen the commercial for the 50 superhero, I think he's talking about the chair announcement, for supervillain X-Men movie, not X-Men movie. I don't know what he's talking about, honestly. Almost sounds like it. You better believe it. Again, I have no idea what it's talking about. The Marvel movie that's in the process, in production. I mean, we've got Robert Downey Jr. playing evil person Iron Man. And then he's playing 2 other roles. I used to know that. But then Chris Evans is playing Captain America, young Captain America, evil Captain America, and Captain Hydra. Or something like that. Lord Hydra. Whatever. That's the first quote. I'm just reading the words on the page. Because again, the way he says it, what he's saying, is so weird and so fascinating. Next one. Quote, it's like, why did they just cast the Avengers, the original Avengers, as all the characters, villains, assassins, sidekicks? Apparently, after denying it vociferously for at least a year, so Elizabeth Olsen's coming back, not only a Scarlet Witch, but a good Scarlet Witch. Again, this is just me commenting. He's just dropping bombshell after bombshell, and it doesn't seem like he even is noticing what he's doing, or maybe he knows exactly what he's saying. Let's continue on. Quote, so I don't know if that means the Vision's coming back. It's like all the original X-Men are coming back for 2 weeks. We don't know if Famke Janssen would come back, Jean Grey, the original Jean Grey actress, but now Famke Janssen is coming back. So that's weird. I think he's saying we didn't know originally because of the chair announcement, but I guess he's saying we know that Famke Janssen is coming back, but she's coming back as Phoenix. Apparently Psylocke is coming back, but she's no longer Asian. Still wearing the same outfit. I don't know what he's talking about there, but okay, let's move on. Quote, and then there's a rumor that Wolverine's going to kill somebody important, which would I'm sitting here thinking, why are you going to do this and make us wait for 3 years for the first X-Men movie? Why don't you just make the first X-Men movie? Why? Who cares about the Avengers? So, okay. There's some backstory there. I think that's the last quote. There's some backstory here. Chris Claremont has written a lot of X-Men comics. So clearly he has an affinity for the X-Men. I think that's really what he was talking about here. And let's dive into that last quote for just a second here. He says there's a rumor that Wolverine's going to kill somebody. So for me, I'm sitting here thinking, could Chris Claremont have some intel about what's going to happen in Avengers Doomsday? Well, he's certainly talking about it because all these things that he's saying, I mean, I follow this stuff pretty closely. I'm not spending every waking minute digging into Reddit posts and subreddits and things like that, but I do follow these things closely enough. And again, you have to take what the leakers and scoopers say with a massive grain of salt. I'm not trusting every single thing that these alleged scoopers are saying. Not because I don't think that they're always given wrong information, although I do think some of them are probably just making stuff up, but because we just don't know. We just don't know, right? So it's possible that these things are true, because he's saying some really random things that I've never heard before. Robert Downey Jr. coming back and playing 2 other characters other than Iron Man and Doom. Okay, Captain America Chris Evans playing a young Captain America, and then a regular Captain America, and an evil Captain America, and Captain Hydra. Okay, Psylocke coming back. Okay, like it's all these things. There's some things in here that you're like, yeah, I guess he could have just been making these things up. He could have just been on some Reddit forum or some obscure forum and been like, oh, I saw these rumors and I want to talk about them. I don't know. It's so bizarre to me because, I mean, the point that he's trying to make here ultimately is why don't you just make an X-Men movie? And that's his own gripe to pick and all that kind of stuff. I happen to think it's fine. Like, take your time with the X-Men. Do what you want. I get what he's saying though. Whatever. It's just so interesting to me because we can, let's go under the assumption that this is true. It makes sense. A lot of the stuff that he's saying, it makes sense. Psylocke showing up? Sure. Why not? I mean, but Gambit showing up? Okay. That's fine. Wolverine's going to kill somebody? Sure. But great, why not? I mean, not great. It's obviously not great that he kills somebody, but like for the story, right? Like that he's going to do that. Okay, whatever. That Chris Evans is, who we've talked about is going to appear in Doomsday according to all the reports, even though he didn't get a chair. Okay, playing a bunch of Captain America variants and Robert Downey Jr. playing variants of Iron Man as well as Doom, that totally makes sense. I'm so fascinated and baffled by this that I don't know what to make, because it's very possible that Chris Claremont just spoiled a bunch of stuff from Avengers Doomsday. It's also possible that he just saw some article or some post that somebody made up entirely and he's just taking it to the bank. So I don't know. We're just here to talk about it because I think this is so interesting. Guys, what do you think about the comments that Chris Claremont is making about Avengers Doomsday? Do you buy this, or do you think that this is all just coming from rumor and speculation? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, one of the most pleasant Disney Plus series surprises in the past, well, just ever, really, because Disney Plus hasn't been around for that long. I mean, it's kind of crazy to think that it's been around for 6 years, sure, but in the grand scheme of things, it hasn't been around for too long. But one of the biggest pleasant surprises to me has been Hawkeye, the first season of Hawkeye. I liked Hawkeye the first time I saw it, but if you go back and look at the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel when we were doing the Phase 4 rewatch of the MCU, when I rewatched Hawkeye, I found myself really enjoying it. It was perhaps one of the Phase 4 projects in the MCU that jumped up highest in terms of I'm not going to say not liking it, but, in terms of liking it less to liking it more. It really jumped up a lot more than I thought it was going to. Because I understand the complaints. I know that Kingpin, there are some problems with the character and all that kind of stuff. And yes, the Tracksuit Mafia and Eleanor Bishop, and there are just some things that aren't the greatest. The fake out with, the quote unquote fake out with Jack Duquesne as swordsman, not everything worked. But the show, the vibe, the energy, the characters, the charisma, the storyline, the finale is great, guys. I don't know. I love the finale of Hawkeye. I really like the show. So, and also these are characters with Kate Bishop and Clint Barton who seem like they could totally do a season 2. For example, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he's Captain America now, so you give him a movie. WandaVision, you transition her into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness into the films. Loki gets a season 2 because it makes sense. There are shows and movies that feel more appropriate to be in a certain medium, as the characters progress to a certain point. Hawkeye feels like, and this is no disrespect to Clint Barton, I would love to see him in Avengers Doomsday. Really would love to see him in Avengers Doomsday. I'm just saying, in terms of the story and the way that they can tell these stories with these more grounded heroes, I would love to have seen Hawkeye Season 2. In fact, Jeremy Renner has just confirmed Hawkeye Season 2 was going to happen until he turned it down. Now, there's a lot of context around this, and for those of you who know, he doesn't explicitly talk about this, although he mentions it. But for those of you who are unaware, Jeremy Renner, I think this was, I want to say January 2023 or 2023, I think. Jeremy Renner was out in the snow and he saved his nephew from a snowplow and basically got completely run over. And I think he said he died. He clinically was dead for a few seconds and then he came back to life. And it is unbelievable. It is remarkable. It's astounding that he is still with us today. And I am just so happy and thankful that is the case. It is incredible what he went through and the fact that he survived. So that is the context here. And I say this because, again, it's amazing, but also it does have some reference to what he talks about later on with this Hawkeye Season 2 situation. So let's read out some of these quotes here, because there are a couple of things going on in terms of why he didn't return for Hawkeye Season 2 and what I think about that, and then we'll get into my thoughts. So, quote, "They asked me to do a Season 2, and they offered me half the money." Okay, so keep that in mind. That's going to be something that's pretty important throughout this. Continuing on, and I'm like, wow, that's going to take me twice the amount of work for half the amount of money, and 8 months of my time, and to do it for half the amount. I'm like, I'm sorry. Why did you think I'm only half the Jeremy because I got run over? Is that why you want to pay me half of what I made on the first season? And this is not Marvel. This is just Disney. Not even Disney. It is just the penny pinchers, the accountants. It's a very, very harsh, but I think so, truthful statement here. But anyways, another part of the quote here before we move on. Quote, "I told them, go fly a kite at just the insult offer. And so we did not see eye to eye on that, sadly. I still love the character. I'd still love to do it, but I had to defend myself. I didn't ask for any more money, mind you. Just pay me what I made the first season. So it is a little disheartening that didn't happen, but that's fine. I'm happy to let that go because my body's probably thanking me time and time again that I'm not doing it again or doing it right now, but we will see." So it's interesting, right? Because on face value, for these Hollywood actors who have probably made millions of dollars throughout their lifetimes, and we're talking about the A-listers, right? Because I know that there are many actors in Hollywood who live paycheck to paycheck, and to make the blanket statement that all actors are rich and entitled is not true. The A-list actors, I'm not saying that they're rich and entitled, but they are rich for the most part. They make tons of money. And so on face value, blanket statement, actors, big actors, these kinds of superhero action, Dwayne Johnson kind of actors who are saying, no, I didn't get paid well enough. Sometimes there are situations in which, yes, they are just being entitled. That is I think there are certainly situations where they are asking for way too much money from the studio to make their movie. It depends on the situation, though. For example, there are situations about equitable pay, in my opinion. For example, even if we're talking about millions of dollars, if a woman co-star gets paid half the amount that the male co-star gets, then I think that they definitely have the right to defend themselves and to say, no, I'm not going to be on this project. Again, we can talk about the whole, well, it's millions of dollars, but it's about more than just that. It's about the principle, right? In this situation, I think it's actually something very similar. Because Jeremy Renner is not, he's not one to lie. He's not one to be, at the very least from my perspective, he's not one to kind of hide these things. What he's saying here is that you're asking me to come back for season 2, and he is physically just, like, I think the fact that he is alive is a miracle. The fact that he is acting still, is just mind-blowing. And they're asking him to maybe do stunts, to do some more action-oriented things, to at least give up 8 months of his life for half the pay of season 1. If that is in fact true, maybe he's fudging the numbers. I don't know. I don't know what the actual numbers are. If that is in fact true, that is unbelievable. It is unbelievable. And what he's saying, if what he's saying is true, he says, I'm not asking you to pay me double the amount that I made the last time. He says, I'm asking you just pay me the same amount. And look, I understand that's probably somewhere in the realm of millions of dollars. But in this case, the man almost died, and they're asking him take half. Again, he also acknowledges, he's being fair. He's not like, I hate Marvel now, I hate this character and all that kind of stuff. He's saying, no, it's the accountants. And it is probably the accountants. Probably Disney is not in the best financial situation, and they're probably like, we're paying way too much money. We're probably paying Robert Downey Jr. $100 billion to be Dr. Doom in Avengers Doomsday. I don't know if we can pay. And that's probably where the number crunching came in. And for Jeremy Renner, he's like, I can't do that. And he says, it's not Marvel, it's not Disney, it's just, it's the money, it's the accountants. And so the fact that he's saying, I still love this character, I still want to do it, but I just have to defend myself, I actually think is a very, very valid point. Does this mean Hawkeye Season 2 is dead? No, I don't think so. I think actually Hawkeye Season 2 is still one of the most likely TV series in the MCU that is going to get a Season 2 out of all of them. I think Ms. Marvel is up there, I think Moon Knight is kind of up there, but I think Hawkeye out of all of them is very much up there. And I think that at a certain point, right, Bob Iger is probably going to realize, Kevin Feige is going to sit down in a room and say, look, face value, we value Jeremy at this price point. And maybe season 2, he doesn't have as much action and all that kind of stuff. We can come to a deal. But we value Jeremy and we want him back. And I think at a certain point, if Marvel really wants Hawkeye season 2 to happen, they will make Hawkeye season 2 to happen. I believe that. Because again, there is no animosity between either side, you can see here. It's just the fact that the money, I think, right? I understand. We're talking about millions of dollars. We're talking about wealth that I, frankly, am not going to be touching ever, probably in my life. But the fact that we're talking about a man who almost died and is being offered half the money to do probably double, triple what his body is capable of doing right now, I think, yeah, he has a right to defend himself. So I think that his comments make sense. Do I think that Hawkeye Season 2 isn't happening? No, I think that Hawkeye Season 2 probably will still be happening. We'll just have to wait and see whether that becomes the case. I think if he shows up in Avengers Doomsday or Secret Wars, which I think he probably will for a couple scenes, I think that's probably a clear indication of where they're going to go in that regard. Guys, what do you think of Jeremy Renner's comments? Hawkeye Season 2 was going to happen. They offered him a role. They offered him to return, and he said no. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, everybody. Let's talk about perhaps the follow-up with the most pressure in the history of television. No, I'm just kidding. Kind of. I don't know. But let's talk about The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3. So if you haven't seen The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 3, this is going to be a full spoiler discussion. So if you haven't seen it, no worries. Just make sure to save this segment, save the podcast, or skip ahead as you desire, and make sure to come back once you have seen it, and you can join in on the discussion in the comments down below if you have seen it, or if you just simply don't care about the spoilers, then welcome, and let's talk about Episode Number 3. So like I said, no big secret, no big surprise. I think that a lot of people were incredibly curious, myself included, to see how this show was going to follow up on last episode. Obviously, last episode killed off one of its main characters, Joel Miller. And now the question becomes, just like it was, I'm sure, when people were playing the games, because again, I haven't played the game, so I don't know. I generally, just for some context, knew that, okay, this is going to set up Ellie on a revenge path, very similar to Abby, and they're going to kind of be on opposing paths. And that's basically all I knew, post Joel's death. And so really the question for me is, how are they going to go about that, and what are they going to do to keep the story alive? Because look, I mean, I've heard the discourse. I'm sure that there are people who decided not to watch episode 3 based on what happened in episode 2. I'm sure that, I'm sure that just because, coming off of such a crazy episode, that there are just people who are like, I can't watch this new episode. I need some time, even if they are intending to come back to the show. And I think there are people who were so attached to Joel as a character that they're not going to come back. And that is the risk you run of making a bold decision like that. But it worked for the games, and we'll see how it works for the television show. So again, I'm just very curious to see what is the direction, where are we going, and how are we going to get there. And again, I suspect I knew that we were heading towards a direct confrontation, obviously, between Ellie and Abby. And now it just is a matter of, okay, how are we going to execute that? So let's dive into episode 3 here, because truly, in terms of specifics, I had no idea what to expect. Like, how do you come back from, last week? So starting out here in this episode, just the gut punches continue when Tommy shows up to Joel's body and he whispers, "Give Sarah my love," alluding to episode 1 of this entire season, where Joel's actual daughter dies. Just a brutal, horrifying, traumatizing. You forget that this show and episode 3 with Frank and I forget the other guy's name, but just the way that this show is able to traumatize you emotionally and really take you on those rides is unbelievable. It's crazy. And speaking of that, Bella Ramsey, I say this a couple times in my notes throughout this episode, but give her all the awards, because earlier on in the episode, when she awakens after the death of Joel for the first time from the hospital, and she just starts screaming, I felt that so viscerally. And it's hard to explain, but you just the screams, he's not even saying anything, but they elicit such a raw reaction from the audience member, myself. And I think that is just so incredibly powerful. Interestingly, though, what I was not expecting, because I thought we were going to sit in this moment for a little while longer, but we jumped 3 months. And I was interested in this choice. I don't know, because we're just never going to see a show or see a version of the show where they really do sit in this and it's just a linear timeline of you have to progress with the characters healing from this and whatnot. But we jump 3 months later, and Ellie is, very clearly Ellie is still so damaged and so hurt by all of this, and who can blame her, right? Seeing her father figure die in front of her, murdered in front of her, right? But it's interesting because we return to this version of Ellie who's talking to Gail, Catherine O'Hara, and she's like, I'm good, I'm okay, and she's trying to keep it together and really just trying to be that version that people want her to be. And she's talking with Gail, and I think it's Ellie who says, your final moment with someone doesn't define your entire time with them. So that's her trying to cover it up. But then Gail responds, but it often does, right? And there's still a lot left unsaid, and we know that Pedro Pascal is going to come back in season 2 for a lot of flashbacks. He wasn't in this episode. I think that they just needed to give us some time to, be with the other characters for a little bit. But I'm sure that we're going to really dive into the fact that because when we start, so what's clear to me, because I was a little unclear about this. What's clear to me now, at least from what we've seen in the show, is that Ellie doesn't know anything about what Joel did by killing the Firefly. She's going to know because Abby's going to tell her. I'm positive of that. And that's going to brew up a whole other batch of trauma and drama for her, right? But she doesn't know about that. So she was mad at Joel for another reason entirely, and that's not been revealed yet. So I think that that's going to be a crux of these flashbacks that we head into, because that's what Catherine O'Hara's character Gail brings up to Ellie. She's like, hey, the last time I talked to Joel, I asked, what happened, and Joel said I saved her, and Ellie's like, I don't know what that means. Maybe she's lying. Maybe she knows. But I think part of the draw and the interest of the rest of the season is going to be how that unfolds. Like, what actually led up to the moment where Ellie and Joel had that falling out on New Year's Eve. So we'll see. We'll see how we'll see how that unfolds. But again, I think Bella Ramsey, she's doing such a great job of hiding that pain. We know though that anger is just bubbling up inside her. I love the moment though where we let the barriers come down a little bit, let the walls come down a little bit. Bella Ramsey, so good. Just a little scene where she's with Joel's clothes and she starts breaking down. She's so good in those moments. And and also playing that defiance as well and that anger, which is obviously going to play a big part in the season moving forward here. So, and also now it's so clear, right? The parallels are so clear that Ellie is now at this point of rage, that exactly that same point of rage that Abby was at the beginning of the season, and their paths are really going to crisscross here. Then we cut to people in the forest who are talking about a prophet who was dead for 10 years. Kind of random. Are we going to get more backstory about them later? I honestly have no idea. They do come back later, obviously, or rather their bodies come back later. But I was a little confused about this. I thought this was going to be a whole subplot, and I'm sure it will be at some point where they explain. I'm assuming WLF, the Western Liberation Front, is that what they're called? The group that Abby's a part of, I guess. I'm sure that, we'll get an explanation as to why they presumably killed all these people, but as of right now, I have no idea. So just kind of a random subplot here, which is interesting. Then we cut to this council scene, and a lot of really interesting dynamics going on here, because one guy gets up and he's like, look, we got to forgive. Like, we got to have mercy. And on a human level, at a place where, for me as an example, like, I'm not going through that kind of trauma. I mean, yes, it's the human ideal. We want forgiveness, grace, mercy, right? We want to really think about, live up to those ideals of being better people. But you know what Ellie's going through, and you can see her fury is beginning to grow. And then interestingly, Seth, right? The guy who made that really, offensive remark to Ellie and Dina in episode 1, is suddenly on their side in a different way. Obviously, he apologized in the last episode, but he's on their side in the sense that, he's like, we got to make them pay. It's retribution, and they're going to come back for us. And so then I thought that was an interesting twist for that character, who also has a moment where he helps them out later on in the episode as well. And then Ellie gives her speech, and she, she wrote it down. She's trying to stay composed, and she's doing a good job. And she thinks it's about justice. And it's hard. And we're not going to go into the philosophy of any of this. It really, what I'm here to do is just to sit in these emotions and really applaud the creators of the show for allowing us to sit in these emotions, because it's hard, right? Is it justice? tit for tat? Is it revenge? Yes. Is it some kind of justice? Yes. Is it the right kind of justice? I don't think so. But what do you do? Because also the people, I think Seth says something like, well, we got to make them pay, because if we don't make them pay, they're going to come back. And it's true, right? I mean, because on the one hand, if they don't go after them, there's the sense in which they are going to come back, or they're going to attack them again in some sense, even though, they don't know that it was just a vendetta against Joel. They don't know that, right? But on the other hand, if you do go after them, it's not as simple, right? As just, okay, we're one for one, we're done. It's going to start a war, right? And so there's just so many complicating things that are going on here, that I think we're really going to dig into for the rest of the season. It's crazy to me, though, that the council is just so casually voting on sending an execution party to Seattle like it's nothing, like they're just voting on some kind of inane bill or something. I think that's, I don't know, part of the situation, right? It's so desensitized to all these kinds of things, but they reject it. Ellie's on her own. We knew that she was going to go regardless, but Dina decides to join her on the adventure. And I suppose that, in terms of, I was thinking about playing the game, I'm sure that was the big thing of, okay, so now Joel's gone, Joel and Ellie are not together anymore, and it's going to be Dina and Ellie for the most part. So I kind of figured that was going to happen as well. And I think that, we see later in the tent that Dina's like, oh, I that didn't mean anything. And Ellie's like, yeah, it didn't mean anything. But we see those feelings beginning to burgeon, and I'm sure that that's going to really play itself out into season 2 and probably season 3. Season 3 is going to be the second half of The Last of Us Part 2. So we'll see what happens. They were actually, it took me a second because they were talking on the horse on the way, and Dina was like, okay, who was the first person you killed? And I was like, whoa, that's a crazy question. And Ellie was like, oh, the first one is to I'm not going to get into that, but the second one she talked about. And I was like, oh, are we ever going to learn about that first one? And I thought about it, and I was like, oh, no, that was Storm Reed's character, I think, right? I think she killed Storm Reed's character in that flashback episode in season 1. That was a great episode. That was a crazy episode, where she was at the ball. But yeah, I think that's what it was referring to. You can let me know in the comments. down below. But yeah, they're in their tent, they're sharing their feelings, and then they run across the people earlier from the Prophet people who got killed, and probably by Abby's crew. And then we cut to Seattle. We see a tank. We see lots of military people showing up, and that's the setup, I guess. So there's going to be some confrontation. I mean, there's two young women heading into a place where there's going to be, looks like, hundreds of soldiers, hundreds of military or WLF soldiers or whatever's going on there. Who knows? Who knows how they're going to go up against that? And honestly, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen for the rest of the show. Directionally, like I said, we have an idea of what's going to happen. It's Ellie going after Abby and trying to get her own revenge, and we'll see what happens there. But I think for the most part, especially as sort of I'm not going to say a letdown episode after the craziness that was last week, but just sort of a follow-up, right? I think that this was solid, and I'm still interested to see where we go from here. I'm still very, I'm missing Pedro Pascal, and I think that I'll be glad to see him in flashbacks, because I really do think we do need to resolve and understand where these characters were coming from entering the season, right? Why they were so mad at each other. And I think that that's definitely something that we'll need to resolve as well. But guys, that is season 2, episode 3. The show must go on. Even if Joel's dead, the show must go on, and we're heading into a very interesting confrontation, I'm sure, in the coming weeks ahead. So guys, those are my thoughts on season 2, episode 3 of The Last of Us. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this episode, because I'd be very interested to see, did you guys, are you guys still on board, or after last week, after last week's episode, are you like, nope, kind of over it? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, another week and essentially another Star Wars movie to talk about, because Andor Season 2 is releasing 3 episodes every single week, and we are here to talk about the next chapter in the second season of Andor Season 2, episodes 4 through 6. So, again, this is going to be a spoiler discussion for Andor Season 2, episodes 4 through 6. If you have not seen those episodes, no worries. Just make sure to come back after you have. Or if you don't care about spoilers, then welcome. But this is your spoiler warning for those 3 episodes. And, of course, the first 3 episodes of Andor Season 2 as well. So, without further ado, let's get into it. I just want to give, as always, a little bit of context here before we dive further. I had watched Andor Season 1 when it initially came out, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. But I recently did a rewatch, and you can go check out that rewatch segment on the podcast where it came out a couple weeks ago. And I really enjoyed it a lot more the second time around. And I think that, the binging model for a show like this is really, I just feel like it's a much better viewing experience. I know that the first season, I think the first 3 episodes came out all at once, but then they kind of staggered the episodes like they usually do on Disney+. But with this season, they're using the strategy because every single, mini arc or chapter, whatever they're deciding to call it, they encompass 1 year leading up to the events of Rogue One, a Star Wars story. So every week we're getting 3 entire episodes, and like I said, it's basically a mini movie that we're getting here every single week. So I watched episodes 1 through 3, and I have to say, I talked about it last week. Go check out my thoughts there. I liked episodes 1 through 3, but I think they were quite uneven, in my opinion. Again, maybe I don't know, maybe I just rewatch Andor immediately, because maybe it's for me, I just need to rewatch season 2, just like I did with season 1, and maybe I'll appreciate it a lot more. But I just think certain parts of the first 3 episodes did not click as well for me as it seemed like they did for other people, but I still saw, obviously, the huge potential in the show that that exists from the first season as well. Just really the potential of the drama, the character work, the dialogue, the way that they're exploring Star Wars. It's really brilliant. It's really awesome. And so I was not discouraged by any means after watching the first 3 episodes. I was not like, oh, this show is gonna suck. It was just more like, enjoyed the first 3 episodes, but let's see where we go from here. So we dive into episodes 4 through 6, and this is going to be, I suppose, maybe they're going to continue on. I think they will actually continue on in the next arcs because they haven't fully resolved, but this is really diving into the Gorman arc of the show. And like I said, I think that there's still a lot of unresolved things at the end of these episodes, but still, this is where the bulk of that is going on. So let's dive into episode 4. I took notes, as always. I'm not going to go super in detail as I usually do because it's 3 entire episodes. It's a whole lot. So let's get into it without further ado. So, I as I was starting out these episodes here, I kind of had the thought that, just based on what we did with Rogue One and what's going on with the show, the kind of tone that they're setting, I feel like, and you see with Bix right away, things are not going well with Bix. She has so much PTSD from that doctor that bookends the beginning and the end of this little mini chapter here. I just have a bad feeling. I have a very bad feeling that none of the characters that we don't see in Rogue One, including Luthen and Bix and Cinta already dies here, and I don't know about Val. I don't think any of them are going to make it through this show. I feel like, especially if Rogue One had the guts to kill all those characters, I feel like it's just going to be the lesson of this is the price of the rebellion, this is the price of war, and it sucks, but I think we're headed in that direction. We'll see. We will see, but they're on Coruscant now, which is a very interesting twist here. And then we head to Gorman, so that's where we spend the majority of this arc here on Coruscant. On those two planets on Gorman and on Coruscant. Cyril is hanging out there talking to his mom on FaceTime, and they're kind of. It's a semblance of normalcy. Even Cyril's mom is like, why are you on Gorman? Turns out that he is stationed there very strategically because of Dedra, and they're trying to basically because we learned in the last 3 episodes that Gorman is the site of energy that they need for the Death Star, it looks like, and so that's why they're really oppressing the Gormans here, and that's why he's stationed there as well. But we also get some insights into Bix and Cassian. They're in love, and they're trying to live a normal life. Cassian's being very paranoid, but they're going grocery shopping. They're going to dinner. I think it's really nice. It's really it's really lovely. But once we get back to Coruscant, to their apartment, it kind of all comes crashing down. And I think that's one of the things that's really sad about this, but it's so true to life, is that they're fighting a war, right? They're in the middle of a rebellion. How can you have that little happiness, right? How can you enjoy those little moments when there's so much wrong going on out there? And I think that that's a very real part of this show as well. So they're trying to work it out, but again, they're at war. And I love also, though, in all these scenes, how Tony Gilroy is showing us different sides of the Star Wars universe, even Coruscant, just different sides of Coruscant. But Gorman is different from Aldhani from the previous 3 episodes. Is different from that planet where they were held prisoners. So I really love that is going on as well. On Gorman, though, so we have this whole arc that's being set up here in episode 4, where Cyril is making a big scene. The ISB comes in and sweeps the office, and he's like, "No, I hate when this happens." And he's also going to meet with the Gorman front, right? These rebels on Gorman, and he's gaining their trust is what's going on here. And at first I was kind of thinking, oh, is Cyril, is he kind of turning on the Empire? But I mean, his character is so loyal to the Empire that it's just not in line with who he is, and I think that makes a lot of sense here. As well. We also get a little scene of Lonnie, and Lonnie becomes a very important character in the finale of this little arc here, with Clea especially. But he talks with Luthen. He's getting a little bit more of a role in the Empire, and he's still a spy. He's still a spy. And also, speaking of things going on in Coruscant, Mon Mothma also is trying to pass some bills here in the Senate, and trying to protect the Gormans, because they're all seeing that the Empire is oppressing the Gormans. And look, I mean, she's trying to get votes here, and it sounds silly, right? Because it's about vote getting, and it's counting votes. But I've always said this, right? It's not the capital P American politics that I want in Star Wars or anything, like no Democrat, Republican, whatever. But it's politics, right? Politics in Star Wars, I think, is fascinating. And I love this stuff. I watched Conclave recently, which is unfortunately very timely with the passing of the Pope recently. But watch Conclave during the Oscar season. I love Conclave, and Conclave was a movie about counting votes, and I thought it was fascinating. So I think all this stuff that's going on with Mon Mothma, I think it's so fun. Like, this is the best part of Star Wars to me, at least in this sort of scale. Because of course I love the lightsabers and the Jedi and whatnot, but on this side of Star Wars, I think that it's really, really great here. And I think that's awesome. So yeah, but they're also, so that's going on here. And then I think Luthen is trying to figure out what Dedra and Cyril are doing on Gorman. It's obviously for the Death Star. This episode I really was on board with. It was setting up something really fun with the politics. It was also setting up the conflict on Gorman. They know the Empire is building something. They also talk about the fact that, so again, Luthen sends Cassian to Gorman because he's like, I need you to figure this out, see what's going on here. Little does Cassian know that, Val and Cinta are already there, and they're already on board with all this stuff that's going on here. Also crazy that Tarkin, basically, it's revealed in the next episode, I think, but he he killed 500 Gormans 16 years ago. He basically landed a cruiser on the entire an entire crowd of Gormans, and it's really, that's crazy. That just shows you the brutality of the Empire here. We end this episode here. We end the episode with Saw a little bit, and Saw is going to go wild in the next episode. But we'll get to that in just a second. And we also end the episode with another nice moment between Andor and Bix. But Bix, she's not doing well. She's taking this sort of sleeping drug, and yeah, I mean, it just, the characters are not doing well. But we're setting up a lot of intrigue here as we head into episode number 5. Episode number 5. I've always said this, and I was hoping that this wouldn't be the case, and I don't think it is the case here necessarily, but these middle episodes are a little bit, there's a little less to talk about because they're just sort of not in a bad way, just sort of a continuation of what's been going on previously. So there's not as much to talk about here in episode 5, but still a lot of interesting stuff going on here. The Empire is trying to remove those bugs from Cyril's office, like we talked about, and he's making a big scene about it. There's all of that. And Clea is also, so then we're setting up another mini arc here with Clea, who is Luthen's assistant, and she's basically, she's finding out the fact that there's a bug, that they planted a bug on one of the art installation pieces, and they're going to get found out, basically. And so that's going to be her big arc in episode 6 as well. Luthen goes to visit Bix. He's like, yep, you're not doing well. Not great. And yeah, she's not doing great. Cyril, and meanwhile, he's being he's being a great double agent in terms of serving the Empire, and he reports back to Coruscant, and they're like, "Great job, Cyril!" And he also eats cereal with his mom. Also, there's Good Morning Coruscant. That's crazy. That was a little bit too much for me. I don't know. I could have done without that. To be quite honest with you, I think that was a little bit on the nose, but I digress here. But yeah, I mean, so they have this whole plan, the Empire does, the ISB does, set up where they want the Gormans to get a win so then they can crush them afterwards. It's just, that's really cruel. It's conniving, it's wicked, and it's really cruel, and that is the Empire at its quote unquote best. And it's crazy what they're able to do here. But then, like I said, there's not a whole lot to talk about episode 5. I want to get to episode 6 here. We end though with Saw. So there's this thing going on here where he's trying to extract something. Like, I don't know if it's fuel. I wasn't honestly entirely sure what was going on here, but he's just at the end of this episode inhaling some kind of toxic gas or something, which, if you remember in Rogue One, I mean, he was on, no pun intended, he was on fumes. He was, literally sucking in oxygen or doing something. He was not in good shape in Rogue One. So this is, I suppose, what he's doing. I don't know why. Honestly, if you guys have more insight into this, again, I've just seen these episodes once. I just saw them, and I'm just giving my immediate reactions. But yeah, it's a lot of crazy stuff going on over there as well. So we head into episode 6, and episode 6, here we go. Luthen and Cassian meet up here, and Luthen's like, all right, well, he tells Cassian, we don't need the Gormans, but I think what he's setting up there is the fact that Val and Cinta are already there, so it doesn't necessarily matter that Cassian is not on board for that. But Luthen telling Cassian basically he's got to pull it together. He and Bix have got to pull it together. It's Luthen being like, I've given up everything. I know I'm not the nicest person here, but again, it's all for the rebellion, and I've given up my humanity, and you're just gonna have to deal with it. And that's what's going on with Luthen. So also some more references here to Dr. Gorst. Basically, they're gonna set up an entire program with this mind bending, the crazy thing that made Bix go insane, that they're gonna set it up here, and that pays off at the very end of this episode here. But we cut back to Dedra, and there's a reminder here that Cyril, even though he's on Gorman and he knows that there's some plan going on with the Gormans, doesn't know what this is actually for, that it's for the Death Star. And I think that that's going to be an interesting revelation. I'm sure he's going to find out at some point. Maybe not. But yeah, we'll see about that. So meanwhile, Cassian is off of Gorman, and Val and Cinta are basically in charge of all of this at this point here. And it's sort of a mini Aldhani arc, right? It's a mini Aldhani arc going on here, where they sort of have this little heist thing that's going on, which I think is fun. I think it's a cool thing to have here, but I guess you have less time to get invested in all of it because it just doesn't, you didn't have all the episodes preceding it. I mean, you did, but for Aldhani, basically the entire 3 episodes they were planning the heist, and this is sort of just like a truncated version of that, but still. And meanwhile, in Coruscant, the other thing that's going on here is party. There's this party going on here, and Krennic shows up, which is quite scary. And Bail Organa cameo. Was that Jimmy Smits? You'll have to let me know in the comments. I wasn't sure. He just kind of came in and out of the scene very, very quickly here. But basically, the most tense part of this entire episode to me was that scene where Clea was trying to get that listening device out of that artifact. That was literally the most intense thing of this entire episode. It was crazy how well they edited that back and forth. Like, literally 5 seconds you see her just kind of trying to twist the device out of the of the artifact, and it would just cut back to the stuff on Gorman, and then would cut back to her. It was so tense, and they won. I love the ending where she and Luthen are just laughing about it, because it's crazy. I thought she was gonna die. I thought something was gonna happen, and they got it out. And I don't think I can't imagine that they're gonna get away with it scot-free. I have to imagine something's gonna happen. But I mean, a year passes, right? A year is gonna pass before the next 3 episodes, so we'll see. But meanwhile, in Gorman, it's something goes awry, and Cinta is killed, and Val just completely goes off on that guy, the Gorman who does that, and it's really sad. It's kind of a scary scene there. So we end the episode here, and Bix and Cassian go rogue, and they blow up a bunch of stuff with the Empire. And you have to know that Luthen is not going to be happy about that, unless Luthen sanctioned this, but I just can't imagine that that's what happened there. So yeah, guys, that's where we end this episode, these arcs, this little mini arc rather. And I really enjoyed it. I really did. I thought that this was more of what I was hoping and expecting from Andor. I think that, again, not that I didn't like the first 3 episodes, but the first 3 episodes just sort of felt like they were a little uneven, and this felt like it focused up big time. And I love also that, it's a mini arc within itself, these 3 episodes, but it also is continuing a lot of the same strands from the first 3 episodes as well, about the Gormans with Krennic, the stuff about Luthen, Cassian, Bix, like all that kind of stuff. It's carrying over, so it's not like it's completely separated, and I really, really enjoy that. The politics, like I said in these episodes, I enjoyed so much. I think that was so well done here. The intrigue, just the fact that taking out a listening device from an artifact was the most tense thing in this entire show so far, I think is huge props to the way that they edited and filmed these scenes. So guys, those were my thoughts on these 3 episodes. I really enjoyed a lot of the stuff that was going on here. Had a lot of questions still. I think we're going to see the Death Star. That's say that really fast. The Death Star. We're going to see that very soon. And I think that the Gorman, we're going to see a lot of pain cost to the Gormans in a little bit. And I'm not excited about that, because that's gonna be painful to watch there. And we'll see where K2SO shows up. I'm betting that it's gonna be in the next arc, because I can't imagine that it's just gonna be for the final couple episodes. I would hope not. We'll have to see about that. Guys, what did you think about episodes 4 through 6 of Andor Season 2? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, let's talk about the newest MCU movie, Thunderbolts. Asterisk. And we'll talk about that asterisk in the spoiler review. But before we get into that, this is going to be a non-spoiler reaction to Thunderbolts, the newest MCU film. So, non-spoiler review, I should say, of Thunderbolts. And normally I do these reviews, non-spoiler and spoiler together. And that's primarily because I try to watch the movies the day they come out. So usually the Friday, and then we try to post the reviews for the upcoming podcast, which comes out on Saturday. So kind of a quick turnaround. And I want to be able to put the reviews out pretty quickly, and so they're usually put together. But this time I was able to see Thunderbolts on the Thursday, and so I am able to split them out. So I'm going to talk about Thunderbolts in a non-spoiler segment and put that on the channel, so that hopefully if you guys haven't seen Thunderbolts, you can check out my non-spoiler review. And then a day later, hopefully we'll release our spoiler segment, or it can be all heard on the podcast that comes out on Saturday morning. Anyways, all that aside, this is going to be completely non-spoiler, and then we will definitely get into the spoiler segment later on. And I'll of course be talking about the post-credit scenes in that segment, but also in a separate segment as well. So Thunderbolts is the MCU movie that, yes, people have been saying, kind of like the MCU Suicide Squad, or, just the group of anti-heroes, like the group of heroes that didn't really fit together. And are they heroes? Are they villains? Are they good people? Are they not good people? But a lot of interesting personalities coming to the table to face a threat. And if you haven't seen the trailers, then, well, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about what's in the trailers, but obviously not too much further than that. And even then, I'm going to be a little bit vague because there's some interesting stuff in this movie. But they're coming together to face a threat, a very shadowy threat that is looming over New York City under some kind of duress, and Valentina is a part of this somehow, and a lot of interesting things going on. So that's the context around Thunderbolts. I had always said, and the trailers, I like the trailers, but even aside from the trailers, I always said that this movie had just so much potential because of the cast and the way that the film is being presented. It's not like the film, this kind of thing hasn't been done before. A group of misfits, a group of ragtag anti-heroes, villains being put together in an interesting situation. Even DC has done this many times before with Suicide Squad, a couple times. So again, this is not anything inherently new, but I just think that the kinds of personalities that they put together, also world-class talent, Sebastian Stan and Florence Pugh. Florence Pugh is incredible. I mean, not just, Thunderbolts, but just in general, she's incredible. And I think that putting together a really interesting roster also of Ghost and Taskmaster and US Agent and Red Guardian, Bucky, Yelena, and then mixing all of them with the sort of lingering building subplot of, Valentina being a part of the film as well. Again, it's a recipe that I think, I think it has a lot of potential for success, right? That's what I was thinking before the film came out. And I also think that the way that they were just presenting the film, and I think the trailers, just the chemistry between the team and some of the things that we were seeing in the trailer. Again, not to spoil anything, it's in the trailers, but there's an interesting character named Bob who's in the movie, and he becomes I won't spoil it, but he becomes an interesting component to the film in very unique and interesting ways. So there's all of that going for it. So I watched Thunderbolts, and here's what I will say. I don't think Thunderbolts is perfect. I don't think that I walked out of Thunderbolts, with the same euphoric kind of feeling of an Avengers Endgame, an Avengers Infinity War. Euphoric is maybe the wrong word for that kind of movie. Spider-Man No Way Home. This movie's different, though. This movie's different, right? Because I came out of it saying Thunderbolts is not just superhero movie good. And I say that to say that while I love Avengers Endgame, and while I love Spider-Man No Way Home, you point to things in those two films that are so unique to a personal experience, as in, I grew up watching all the Spider-Man movies. I love all the Spider-Man. I love Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire and all of those characters. And I loved the ending of Spider-Man No Way Home. In Avengers Endgame, you come out of Avengers Endgame saying, I grew up an MCU fan and I love the MCU and everything that it brought to me as a kid and growing up with it and watching all the films. And this is the culmination. I love Endgame. Those are, in my opinion, two films that are also just good movies, but the experiences that you come out of those two movies with are very specific to the, just being a fan, right? And I think Thunderbolts, right, rewards you as an MCU fan. But I came out of Thunderbolts saying, this is a good movie. It's a really good movie. And the things that I was thinking about after Thunderbolts had very little to do with superhero anything, and actually had more to do with just life. This movie is deep. This movie is emotional. The ending of the movie had me close to tears. It is profound, actually, what they were able to do at the conclusion of the movie, right? Throughout the movie, they're setting up all these things, and it comes to a head at the end of Thunderbolts, and it's really wonderful. It's beautiful, and it's different for an MCU movie. Now, again, I said Thunderbolts isn't perfect, in my opinion. I think the first half of Thunderbolts, I actually put a post out on my YouTube channel before the podcast comes out to say that, I don't think Thunderbolts is perfect, because I think the first half of the movie, honestly, is a little bit slow, and it takes its time to get going. And I think that, this movie is over 2 hours long, I believe. So it's not like, objectively the movie is a short movie, a short film, right? But I think that when you get to the second act, there's a point in the movie where it's like, you finally feel like the movie is kicking into gear. And then you suddenly realize that the movie's halfway over, basically. And by the time, I think the second act honestly suffered a lot from that, because the first act is fun. And the first act has a lot of interesting things. We're getting introduced to the characters again and introduced to them as a team together and all that setup. And you see their chemistry, for the first time, and then see how it develops. All that is really fun, really enjoyable. But again, it kind of takes a while to get going because they're introducing a lot of these different things. And then you get to the second act, and the second act just kind of zips by. And all of a sudden, you're in the third act. And like I said, the third act of the movie is phenomenal. Like the last 30 to 45 minutes of this movie I think really do rank amongst the top of the MCU. And again, it's not for those same reasons. It's not similar to Endgame or No Way Home, but it's like a Black Panther Wakanda Forever, for example, which even then is rooted very much in real world trauma and real world grief. But even still, I love the ending of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. But, I think that the ending of Thunderbolts is just, it's beautiful. It's beautifully done. I just think that, by the time you get to the end, you're like, oh, we're already here. And then you get to the end and it starts to go and it starts to ramp up towards the finale. And you're like, oh my goodness, I see. I get it now. So, it's not like anything inherently was bad. It's not like I'm saying, oh, the second act was terrible, the first act was terrible, and it made the third act look so much better in comparison. Nothing like that. Standouts are obviously Florence Pugh. I think that Florence Pugh does a phenomenal job. David Harbour is so funny, as always. The rest of the cast, I think that Ghost, Taskmaster, and U.S. Agent were kind of relegated to side roles, to be honest with you. I think that they didn't, the three of them, not that necessarily they didn't have a lot of screen time or screen presence, but I just think that what their roles were not as interesting as the other characters. Bucky was interesting. I think he had a couple nice moments, but it's not like he, in my opinion at least, it's not like he stole many scenes in the movie. He was there, and he was there as a very, it was understandable why he was a part of this team. It's not like you were like, why is Bucky in this? No, nothing like that at all. But I think that really the standouts on the Thunderbolts were Florence Pugh just carrying emotionally and screen presence and everything like that. She was just awesome. And David Harbour is just so funny. I mean, he's such a great character, but he also has some really kind and emotional moments in there as well, which I loved. And then we'll talk about Lewis Pullman as Bob. And I really think that there are, again, I'm not going to spoil it, but Lewis Pullman, sorry, I almost called him Bob. Lewis Pullman gives a very wonderful performance. I won't talk about it because I just, for those of you who don't know what happens in the movie and haven't seen the trailers and don't really know, the character of Bob is a very complicated character. And Lewis Pullman is able to pull off that kind of duality and multidimensionality really, really well. And I really enjoyed that. Other parts of the movie, like Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Val and some other supporting characters, they're fine. They're in the movie and they're fine. And I think that the film does what it needs to do with characters like that. But I think for the most part, you're really carried by Florence Pugh, David Harbour, and Lewis Pullman, in my opinion, are the standouts of the movie. Action is really good. I think that some of the action is, nothing, you're not going to come out of Thunderbolts being like, wow, the next Winter Soldier in terms of action, but I really like how scrappy these characters are. I really like the fact that these characters are fighting hand to hand, and the combat is really gritty, and when they're fighting, it's on the ground. No one's shooting, magic lightning out of the sky with a hammer, nothing like that. It's very gritty, and guns and shields and punches and things like that. It's tactical, which I think is a fun thing. But look, guys, I mean, as I wrap up the non-spoiler review, what stands out to me about Thunderbolts is not really any of that. It's really the heart that's at the center of this movie. There's a beating heart at the center of the film that really, like I said, when I walked out of this movie, I wasn't really thinking about the action or the punches or how this fits into the MCU and all those kinds of things. I was so impressed with how the film handled its emotional beats and how it was able to tell a story that sank deeper into my core than an MCU film has been able to do, and even many films have been able to do over the last few months. And I've been so impressed by that. So I really enjoyed Thunderbolts. Again, not a perfect movie, but one that is super memorable, especially by the ending. And I think it's a very exciting thing to see these group of characters. And we know, for those of you who have seen the Avengers Doomsday cast announcement, we know that a lot of them will be returning for Avengers Doomsday. But it's still very exciting to see them in this film and see, hope for a great future for these characters in Avengers Doomsday and beyond. So guys, what do you think about Thunderbolts? Have you seen it, and did you enjoy it? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so we've already done our non-spoiler review for Thunderbolts. That was the previous segment, but let's get into all of those juicy spoilers for this MCU film. Of course, with every MCU film, there are going to be spoilers, so let's dive into it. And I'm very excited because I usually, like I said, I don't usually get to own separate segments for spoiler discussions and spoiler reviews. So this is different, this is exciting, and I can't wait to dive in. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Thunderbolts, guys. Thunderbolts. Full spoiler warning, here we go. Like I said, the first act of the film, I said this in my non-spoiler review, was a little bit slow. And I don't think slow is a bad thing because nothing in the first act inherently was bad to me. I enjoyed very much seeing the characters interact with one another. In fact, one of the best things that they did in the first act was set up that relationship between Yelena and Bob. And from the beginning, I really liked the relationship. It was a very tender and soft relationship that I think translated super well to the ending, which we'll talk about towards the latter half of the spoiler review. But I really enjoyed that because I thought, again, it's just setting up the dynamics between these characters, John Walker, Ghost, and Taskmaster. We'll talk about Taskmaster in just a second. Ghost, I don't think she really had a whole lot to do. Like I said, David Harbour had some great scenes with Yelena and Florence Pugh. But he was mostly the comic relief. I think Bucky was interesting. He had a couple moments, like he had that moment where he was talking to the Thunderbolts at the gas station, I think, or wherever they were, and he was like, "Yep, you have the one chance to make something of your lives." And I think that came very clearly. It shot clearly through to the Thunderbolts because of who Bucky was and what he had gone through and what he has been through. And so I think that is all really interesting and super well done. That's great. But again, I don't think he himself had a whole lot to do either. And maybe that's a little disappointing, but it really was about Bob and Yelena and Red Guardian in general. So I really, again, the first, I would say, hour of the movie, I was like, yeah, it's good. I was almost a little disappointed by the time we reached the halfway point. By the time the Thunderbolts reached the Watchtower, I guess it's called now, because I was like, oh well, I was so excited about the movie that I was like, is this it? Like, is it just gonna be a kind of decent MCU movie? Because if it is, I mean, that's fine. But I'd hope for a little bit more. But then we reach the third act, because like I said, the second act to me really was the victim of all this. If the first act, the way that it was paced and the way that it was going, was setting up a very similarly paced second and third act, this movie would have been 3 hours long. And it didn't need to be 3 hours long. So the second act, I think, really suffered for it, because it was really the second act, what that was, it was beginning at the Watchtower and ending with Yelena entering the Void. That was like 30 minutes. And it was just one fight between the Thunderbolts and Sentry, which was awesome, by the way. I was truly terrified of how you see, because we've seen, for those of you who have seen The Boys, and not everyone, should see The Boys because it's a very, very graphic depiction of superheroes and supervillains. But, Homelander is a very specific kind of evil Superman. Evil Superman is a concept that's been done before. This character is not evil Superman. It's more just what happens when normal or even super soldiers, but heroes go up against an unstoppable force. And that was scary. Like, I think I'm really curious to see where Sentry, how he's going to play into Avengers Doomsday. We know he's going to show up there, because that scene where they're fighting him, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, wow, it was really effectively done, the way that he was handling the Thunderbolts there. And I think that was great. But again, the second act really was more like 20, 30 minutes of the movie. The third act, though. Let's talk about the third act. I read somewhere a while ago that Jake Schreier, the director of the movie, compared the film to Toy Story 3. In the sense, he was like, I wanted to evoke that sense of the furnace scene in Toy Story 3. And at the time, I kind of dismissed it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Maybe he's evoking kind of the misfit toys sort of aspect of the film. But after having seen the last 30 to 45 minutes of Thunderbolts, I get it. I mean, the whole scene where they're going through their own trauma, where Yelena's going through her trauma, and then she's talking to Bob. And Bob, Lewis Pullman I know they were originally going to cast Stephen Yeun, and Stephen Yeun's a good actor. The hurt and the gentleness and kindness, but also the utter pain and distraught that is in Lewis Pullman's face as he acts his way through this movie is unbelievably good. And the third act cements it for me. As we're watching, horrific things happen to a young Bob Reynolds, and understanding this character and the darkness and the void and the idea and the real struggles of mental health and depression and struggle that this man has gone through to get to this point where he really believes, and this is dark, but this is what the movie is dealing with, that nothing matters. And, you get to that final scene where he's fighting the Void, right? It's Bob. It's not even Sentry. It's Bob against the Void. And he's punching and he's trying to kill the Void, and you realize that is exactly what the Void wants. And I I really, as I think about it, I get a little emotional. The scene where Yelena grabs Bob, and it's not just a whole, get off of him, and, you're better than that. I forget exactly what she says. I think she says something like, I'm here. You're not alone. And that hit so hard for me. And I am just so amazed that this is what I walk out of Thunderbolts with, is not, oh, what a great action movie, or what a funny movie in the MCU. I walk out of this movie with that line, you're not alone. And that's beautiful. That is beautiful, and it is wonderful. And I'm so glad that a movie in the MCU deals with those kinds of things in that way. I really am. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie. It isn't, because I think the first chunk of the movie was not paced as well as it could have been to get to the third act. But when you get to that third act, it all comes together in a way where you don't just punch and kick your way out of this. I think Yelena says that earlier on in the movie, like, what? We just punch and kick and shoot, and we need someone to fly, to get out of this. But no. I mean, just like they needed each other to get out of the depression that they were all in. And I think that is such a beautiful thing for this movie. I can't believe it. I'm just, not that I can't believe it, but I couldn't believe how emotionally resonant, that's what I meant to say, emotionally resonant the end of this movie was. And I really am glad. Now, of course, it's an MCU movie, so let's talk about the very end of the movie, right? We'll talk about the post-credit scenes in a separate segment, but Val is like, oh no, I don't want to talk to you guys. And then they go into the tent, and lo and behold, the press is there. And Val says, and here are your new Avengers. And okay, there goes all of my asterisk theories. I thought Dark Avengers made a little more sense to me. I think Dark Avengers was more of what they were at the beginning, because I think the reasoning was fair. Right, I think the reasoning that I gave for Dark Avengers in that separate segment that I did a while ago was that, it's more like a Black Ops team of Avengers, and now I think that's what they were in essence at the beginning. But I think that the asterisk is then now referring to really the fact that these are Val is trying to position them as actually the Avengers, and she really is now anti Nick Fury. Where people think Nick Fury actually is, I have no idea. He's in space somewhere, doing something. Who knows what? Who knows if he's going to show up in Avengers Doomsday? I have no idea. But I think that, and again, we're going to talk about the post-credit scenes. It sets up a very interesting conflict between these new Avengers and the actual, actual Avengers, quote-unquote real Avengers, and then Fantastic Four and X-Men and Wakanda. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. But yeah, I enjoyed the reveal. I think that it made a decent bit of sense there as well. Before we close out this spoiler review, I just wanted to touch base with my hopes and predictions, because I think it's always fun to do. Especially because I want to make fun of the fact that I got a lot of things wrong. So, my hopes, right? These three things I said were, if these three things came true, then the film had a much higher chance of being successful, in my personal opinion. And my predictions were just predictions, right? Bold predictions, but predictions nonetheless. So, 3 hopes. Number 1, that the film would be something more than fun. This movie, definitely, one of the most emotionally resonant movies in the MCU. So yeah, definitely. Number 2, genuine surprises. I think I was thinking more in line of, just big pop moments or things that we haven't seen in the trailers. Because honestly, maybe one of the things that made the first act drag a little bit was just because we'd seen almost all of it in the trailers. And maybe that's why. And again, I don't blame them for hiding a lot of the third act, but I think we saw a lot of the first act in the trailer. But the third act was a genuine surprise to me, and I think that it was great. It was awesome. And number 3, this becomes a team to root for. I don't know if I'm rooting for the team necessarily, because they're kind of morally gray. But in terms of what I actually meant by this, this is a team that I look forward to seeing again. Absolutely. Those 3 things knocked it out of the park. Predictions. The answer to the asterisk mystery is either silly, obvious, or both. Not silly at all. I think it makes total sense. Obvious? Yeah, I think kind of obvious. I think we all thought it was some kind of variation on some kind of Avengers team. So yeah, I don't think it was like I thought about this on my way back from the theater. Why would they do this? Why would they put this in the marketing? It's sort of a gimmick. Yeah, it's a gimmick. Did they need to do it? No, they didn't. Because Falcon and the Winter Soldier could have also had an asterisk, and then they changed it to Captain America and the Winter Soldier. They could have also had an asterisk. It's a little gimmicky, but it got people talking, I guess. And in that one sense, I suppose no press is bad press. So whatever, that's fine. Second prediction, I got very wrong. Taskmaster dies in the first few minutes. Yeah, in the first 15 minutes. But her death is pivotal to the whole story. No, absolutely not. She's done. Like, they talk about her once later on, and she's done. Interestingly, they, give her and Ghost almost zero backstory. Olga Kurylenko, who plays Taskmaster, shows up for literally 3 seconds in the movie, I would say. And then she's gone. So that kind of sucks for her. She was at the premiere, and yeah, that kind of sucks for her. And number 3, Robert Downey Jr. cameos in the post-credit scene. Very close. I get very close. We'll talk about this more in the next segment, but no, he does not. The Fantastic Four instead take his place. So guys, those were my spoiler thoughts on Thunderbolts. I, again, really enjoyed the movie, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about the film in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so we've already done our non-spoiler review for Thunderbolts. That was the previous segment, but let's get into all of those juicy spoilers for this MCU film. Of course, with every MCU film, there are going to be spoilers, so let's dive into it. And I'm very excited because I usually, like I said, I don't usually get to own separate segments for spoiler discussions and spoiler reviews. So this is different, this is exciting, and I can't wait to dive in. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Thunderbolts, guys, Thunderbolts. Full spoiler warning, here we go. Like I said, the first act of the film, I said this in my non-spoiler review, was a little bit slow. And I don't think slow is a bad thing, because nothing in the first act inherently was bad to me. I enjoyed very much seeing the characters interact with one another. In fact, one of the best things that they did in the first act was set up that relationship between Yelena and Bob. And from the beginning, I really liked the relationship. It was a very tender and soft relationship that I think translated super well to the ending, which we'll talk about towards the latter half of the spoiler review. But I really enjoyed that because I thought, again, it's just setting up the dynamics between these characters, John Walker, Ghost, and Taskmaster. We'll talk about Taskmaster in just a second. Ghost, I don't think she really had a whole lot to do. Like I said, David Harbour had some great scenes with Yelena and Florence Pugh. But he was mostly the comic relief. I think Bucky was interesting. He had a couple moments, like he had that moment where he was talking to the Thunderbolts at the gas station, I think, or wherever they were, and he was like, "Yep, you have the one chance to make something of your lives." And I think that came very clearly. It shot clearly through to the Thunderbolts because of who Bucky was and what he had gone through and what he has been through. And so I think that is all really interesting and super well done. That's great. But again, I don't think he himself had a whole lot to do either. And maybe that's a little disappointing. But it really was about Bob and Yelena and Red Guardian in general. So I really, again, the first, I would say, hour of the movie, I was like, yeah, it's good. I was almost a little disappointed by the time we reached the halfway point. By the time the Thunderbolts reached the Watchtower, I guess it's called now, because I was like, oh well, I was so excited about the movie that I was like, is this it? Like, is it just gonna be a kind of decent MCU movie? Because if it is, I mean, that's fine. But I'd hope for a little bit more. But then we reach the third act, because like I said, the second act to me really was the victim of all this. If the first act, the way that it was paced and the way that it was going, was setting up a very similarly paced second and third act, this movie would have been 3 hours long. And it didn't need to be 3 hours long. So the second act, I think, really suffered for it, because it was really the second act, what that was, it was beginning at the Watchtower and ending with Yelena entering the Void. That was like 30 minutes. And it was just one fight between the Thunderbolts and Sentry, which was awesome, by the way. I was truly terrified of how you see, because we've seen, for those of you who have seen The Boys, and not everyone, should see The Boys, because it's a very, very graphic depiction of superheroes and supervillains. But, Homelander is a very specific kind of evil Superman. Evil Superman is a concept that's been done before. This character is not evil Superman. It's more just what happens when normal or even super soldiers, but heroes go up against an unstoppable force. And that was scary. Like, I think I'm really curious to see where Sentry, how he's going to play into Avengers Doomsday. We know he's going to show up there, because that scene where they're fighting him, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, wow, it was really effectively done, the way that he was handling the Thunderbolts there. And I think that was great. But again, the second act really was more like 20, 30 minutes of the movie. The third act, though. Let's talk about the third act. I read somewhere a while ago that Jake Schreier, the director of the movie, compared the film to Toy Story 3. In the sense, he was like, I wanted to evoke that sense of the furnace scene in Toy Story 3. And At the time, I kind of dismissed it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Maybe he's evoking kind of the misfit toys sort of aspect of the film. But after having seen the last 30 to 45 minutes of Thunderbolts, I get it. I mean, the whole scene where they're going through their own trauma, where Yelena's going through her trauma, and then she's talking to Bob. And Bob, Lewis Pullman I know they were originally going to cast Stephen Yeun, and Stephen Yeun's a good actor. The hurt and the gentleness and kindness, but also the utter pain and distraught that is in Lewis Pullman's face as he acts his way through this movie is unbelievably good. And the third act cements it for me. As we're watching, horrific things happen to a young Bob Reynolds, and understanding this character and the darkness and the void and the idea and the real struggles of mental health and depression and struggle that this man has gone through to get to this point where he really believes, and this is dark, but this is what the movie is dealing with, that nothing matters. And, you get to that final scene where he's fighting the void, right? It's Bob. It's not even Sentry. It's Bob against the void. And he's punching and he's trying to kill the void, and you realize that is exactly what the void wants. And I really, as I think about it, I get a little emotional. The scene where Yelena grabs Bob, and it's not just a whole, get off of him, and, you're better than that. I forget exactly what she says. I think she says something like, I'm here. You're not alone. And that hit so hard for me. And I am just so amazed that this is what I walk out of Thunderbolts with, is not, oh, what a great action movie, or what a funny movie in the MCU. I walk out of this movie with that line, you're not alone. And that's beautiful. It is beautiful, and it is wonderful. And I'm so glad that a movie in the MCU deals with those kinds of things in that way. I really am. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie. It isn't, because I think the first chunk of the movie was not paced as well as it could have been to get to the third act. But when you get to that third act, it all comes together in a way where you don't just punch and kick your way out of this. I think Yelena says that earlier on in the movie, like, what? We just punch and kick and shoot, and we need someone to fly, to get out of this. But no. I mean, just like they needed each other to get out of the depression that they were all in. And I think that is such a beautiful thing for this movie. I can't believe it. I'm just not that I can't believe it, but I couldn't believe how emotionally resonant. That's what I meant to say. Emotionally resonant the end of this movie was, and I really am glad. Now, of course, it's an MCU movie, so let's talk about the very end of the movie, right? We'll talk about the post-credit scenes in a separate segment, but the Val is like, oh no, I don't want to talk to you guys, and then they go into the tent, and lo and behold, the press is there, and Val says, and here are your new Avengers. And okay, there goes all of my asterisk theories. I thought Dark Avengers made a little more sense to me. I think Dark Avengers was more of what they were at the beginning, because I think the reasoning was fair, right? I think the reasoning that I gave for Dark Avengers in that separate segment that I did a while ago was that, it's more like a Black Ops team of Avengers. And now, I think that's what they were in essence at the beginning. But I think that the asterisk is then now referring to really the fact that these are, Val is trying to position them as actually the Avengers. And she really is now anti-Nick Fury. Where people think Nick Fury actually is, I have no idea. He's in space somewhere doing something. Who knows what? Who knows if he's going to show up in Avengers Doomsday? I have no idea. But I think that, and again, we're going to talk about the post-credit scenes. It sets up a very interesting conflict between these new Avengers and the actual, actual Avengers, quote-unquote real Avengers, and then Fantastic Four and X-Men and Wakandans. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. But yeah, I enjoyed the reveal. I think that it made a decent bit of sense there as well. Before we close out this spoiler review, I just wanted to touch base with my hopes and predictions, because I think it's always fun to do. Especially because I want to make fun of the fact that I got a lot of things wrong. So my hopes, right? These three things I said were, if these three things came true, then the film had a much higher chance of being successful, in my personal opinion. And my predictions were just predictions, right? Bold predictions, but predictions nonetheless. So 3 hopes. Number 1, that the film would be something more than fun. This movie definitely, one of the most emotionally resonant movies in the MCU. So yeah, definitely. Number 2, genuine surprises. I think I was thinking more in line of, just big pop moments or things that we haven't seen in the trailers. Because honestly, maybe one of the things that made the first act drag a little bit was just because we'd seen almost all of it in the trailers, and maybe that's why. And again, I don't blame them for hiding a lot of the third act, but I think we saw a lot of the first act in the trailer. But the third act was a genuine surprise to me, and I think that it was great. It was awesome. And number 3, this becomes a team to root for. I don't know if I'm rooting for the team necessarily because they're kind of morally gray. But in terms of what I actually meant by this, this is a team that I look forward to seeing again. Absolutely. Those 3 things knocked it out of the park. Predictions. The answer to the asterisk mystery is either silly, obvious, or both. Not silly at all. I think it makes total sense. Obvious? Yeah, I think kind of obvious. I think we all thought it was some kind of variation on some kind of Avengers team. So yeah, I don't think it was. Like, I thought about this on my way back from the theater. Why would they do this? Why would they put this in the marketing? It's sort of a gimmick. Yeah, it's a gimmick. Did they need to do it? No, they didn't. Because, Falcon and the Winter Soldier could have also had an asterisk, and then they changed it to Captain America and the Winter Soldier. They could have also had an asterisk. It's a little gimmicky, but it got people talking, I guess. And in that one sense, I suppose no press is bad press. So whatever, that's fine. Second prediction, I got very wrong. Taskmaster dies in the first few minutes. Yeah, in the first 15 minutes. But her death is pivotal to the whole story. No, absolutely not. She's done. Like, they talk about her once later on, and she's done. Interestingly, they, give her and Ghost almost zero backstory. Olga Kurylenko, who plays Taskmaster, shows up for literally 3 seconds in the movie, I would say. And then she's gone. So that kind of sucks for her. She was at the premiere, and yeah, that kind of sucks for her. And number 3, Robert Downey Jr. cameos in the post-credit scene. Very close. I get very close. We'll talk about this more in the next segment, but no, he does not. The Fantastic Four instead take his place. So guys, those were my spoiler thoughts on Thunderbolts. I, again, really enjoyed the movie, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about the film in the comments down below. And guys, that will do it for episode number 76 of the Access Blockbusters pod. If you couldn't tell, I am beyond thrilled with my experience with Thunderbolts. I am so excited. It's one of those things where you just remember when you were so excited to watch the next MCU project. And I like Deadpool and Wolverine. I thought Captain America Brave New World was okay. I've enjoyed, to a certain extent, every single MCU movie. I haven't really hated any. Even Thor Love and Thunder, it's not great in my opinion. But, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania I think is fine. The Marvels is kind of odd, but it had its moments. So, but Thunderbolts really, since Shang-Chi and Eternals and maybe not so much Black Widow, but, Spider-Man No Way Home. And that era, that was the last time I really continued to just get so excited for the next MCU thing. And here we are again, guys. Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four, Doomsday. Very, very exciting. So anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in. As always, if you haven't subscribed to the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel, make sure to do so. Heading towards 2,000 subscribers. We would love to get there by the end of the year. Thank you so much for those of you who are subscribed. And make sure to check us out on the audio-only platforms as well. And that will do it for me from this week from the Access Blockbusters pod. And I will see you guys in the next one.